Hello and welcome to Dell's Gaming, and this is From the Depths, where I am once again doing some building, which is what I enjoy mostly doing in From the Depths. So it's good that I like building ships that are sort of replicas of real world ships, and I'm going to continue that on. So in the campaign we're now up against the lightning hoods, so I've decided to move on and do a different group of ships to go specifically against the lightning hoods. So they need to be protected against lasers and missiles and be against fairly fast ships in general. And what I've decided to do is to do the Regia Marina, so the Italian Navy, and also the Marine Nationale, so we'll do the French Navy. And one of the reasons for that is that their ships are actually fairly similar in that they were a lot of the times built to compete with each other, so they ended up being fairly similar. Also, around the World War II era, they didn't actually have that many different ships compared to the UK and US, etc., and Germany. So they're maybe putting them together would be good. And also post war they ended up and modern era they tend to share a lot of designs. They tend to have one design which they just change a little bit to be the same in modern era, but in the World War II era I think we can make some interesting ships up to go against the lightning hoods. And I'm going to ignore the World War I and prior ships. We're just going to look at ships which are in the World War II era, because I need to take on the lightning hoods, who are quite good. So I can't have any sort of Mickey Mouse, shall we say, ships. I need some good ships to go against them. So first of all, I have been mucking around with some ships. So this is an Italian destroyer. Basically it's based on the Italian Freccia or Folgore class of destroyer. And before I go any further, I'm to apologise for butchering all of the names of the French and Italian ships, so someone can type them out properly in the comments. But yes, I know I'm going to pronounce them wrong, so I'll say it now and get it over and done with. I'm just going to do the best I can and let everybody have a laugh. But anyway, this is a little destroyer that I've built up, which was built basically to be a high-speed destroyer in the Mediterranean. So this goes along at between 23 to 28 meters a second in its combat mode. Has got a few guns and does okay against basic lightning hood ships. But to go against that, I need something to take on some of the larger ships and to be act as a good defender of the area. And I'm going to go for start off with an Italian cruiser. So whilst I'm just building the first part of it, and you can skip look in the time codes to skip over to relevant parts of the build if you want to ignore me talking about Italian ships and the ship I'm building in particular. So I'm planning to build one of the Condottieri class of cruisers, or mostly two different ones in that class. Now the Condottieri was basically named after famous Italian generals. Apparently they've got some, and there's various classes of ship, and they were quite interesting because they were quite an escalation of design through the period of before the war. They started off being a response to a French ship, where the French were putting in some very fast big destroyers like the Fantastique, and also I think they were coming up with fast battleships, etc., and there was this move towards speed. So the Italians wanted to create a cruiser which had a lot of speed and could take on these destroyers. So the original class of Condottieri was fairly lightly armoured but reasonably armed. So it had 8 guns, 6-inch guns, but it only had less than a 1 inch of belt armour, which is basically getting a bit of card and putting a bit of tin foil around it. You know, basically useless. But it was only up against destroyers, and it did go in trials 38 plus knots. So yeah, it was fairly quick. It only weighed, I think, about 6,500 tons, and the basic theory of the Italian in a lot of these ships at that time was speed is armour, and they were using that idea of using speed to, you know, avoid the combat or set the distance. As time went on and things started to change, and they found that no, speed is not armour, armour's armour, speed is just speed. It is useful, but it doesn't help you. And they were having various redesigns, and over time the ships got significantly more heavy and more guns and more armour. The end result was like the Giuseppe Garibaldi went up to, I think it was about 6 inches of belt armour compared to the original one, less than 1 inch. So significant more belt armour, and obviously a lot heavier. It was 12,000 tons instead of being the original 6,500 tons. What I'm planning to do is do a halfway ship, which is the Montecuculi class, or Montecuculi version of the Condottieri cruiser, which had about 4 inches of armour, had 8 6-inch guns, and was still capable of about 36 knots of speed. So that is the plan. So the primary building points on this ship is going to be the steam engines, because the steam, I'm going to use the new economy versions of the steam engine to try and keep the economy good. I'll also be using shields with laser scatter, because we're going against the lightning hoods. We will need to use shields to go against a laser. There's no way that armor's going to protect against lasers. We need the armor, the laser scattering first, and then on top of that we will obviously need some missile defenses. So although obviously World War II didn't have missile defenses, this ship will have them, and then we will work from that point and see how we go, and give it a bit of testing against some of the regular level ships is where I want this to fight against, not expert or above. This will be up to regular level ships. And welcome back to the build in its current state. I will admit I've done more than just getting to the engines. A few changes I went through and a few decisions I wanted to make, because at one point it seemed like it was getting a little tall because of the size under the deck of the main guns, but it's worked out actually about right. It's floating at a reasonable, not too high above the water, about 3 meters, which is yeah, okay, a little higher than I would have liked. I preferred it around the 2 meter mark, I guess, but it's okay. It's not a problem. I did think I'd have to start rebuilding if it was becoming a bit too top heavy. It is a little top heavy, and there is a lot of light alloy in this rather than metal or wood, which has made it expensive. But anyway, getting through to the steam propulsion is the main bit I wanted to have a look on with the new settings we have. So the engine itself is just past this rear funnel, and what I have set up is large engines with 3 pistons, and then they go through, I think it's up to, how many shafts have we got at the moment? I think we've got 6 reduction gears. Yeah, 6 reduction gears. So that means that this can quite easily get to its full speed on the rear propellers, and the rear propellers are a couple of 5 meters with a couple of normal propellers just for cruising mode, for using less resources than the steam, but the main speed is going to come from the speed. Now, steam is produced by boilers, which, if I come out, we've got some just behind and two on this front funnel. So just behind the engine, we've got a boiler. Now they're all the same. They're a 5 large boilers. One, and this is the second boiler room, and this is the third boiler room, and each of them has an individual vent. You'll see that they all vent through individually. This last one has them going through, and this one, and each of them drives a separate piston. They split here to the left and right, so rather than doing left and right engines, they do a piston on each of the engines. So hopefully, if a boiler gets taken out, you're going to be reduced by 1/3 of your power, theoretically. If the engine room gets taken out, then everything's, it doesn't matter how many boilers you've got going, it's not going to work. As far as boilers go to get up the speed, we're all going to be controlled by control blocks. So the basic is this first control block, which is based upon if there is a forward command and there is no enemy in range, then set the boiler burn rate to 2%. So this is going to be our cruising burn rate and speed, which has given us 8 meters a second. Not a tremendous amount of speed, but we don't need something too good for when you're just cruising around and in the map mode. So that's going to set our basically our map mode speed and fuel resource usage per second. Then we have 2 other settings. Now I'm going to have 2 other settings. One is for when the enemy is quite a long distance away, so it's got to race into the attack, for want of a better word. And then one which is when the enemy are within normal range, so attack range. So under attack range, it goes to 15%, which is still below the 50% mark. So we're going to get an efficiency in bonus, or bonus in efficiency, should I say. And 1500 meters means it's going to circle around. Now that'll actually get us up to about 22 meters a second in full mode. We'll do a max speed run in a minute. And this is then if they are further than 1500. So if they are far away, just going to change that, make sure that goes to, there we go, infinity. So if they're more than 1500 meters away, then go up to 45%. Now that will get us nearly 30 meters a second, and we'll just give that a go. What I'm going to do is set us on a little course and then set everything up to be at full speed. So we're now burning at 45% on the boilers. So this is now changed that to 45%. So we're using quite a lot of materials and burn pressure. Getting up to about 4,708. We're still increasing. We're up to 30 meters a second, 31. I think that's going to be close. Our propellers almost at maximum speed. They're at 220, not quite up to the 240, but they're certainly getting close to a maximum speed. 230, 235, 240. We are now at maximum propeller speed, and we're running at 34 meters a second. So, and that's right, I think I can reduce that down from 45 down a little bit, so our engines, because there's no point in going above. Although our propellers are showing maximum, we're actually increasing in force applied. But yeah, I might bring that down a little bit. So that's our maximum speed now, 34 meters a second, which is not inconsiderate. So from our maximum speed of 34, we're now down into the battle speed of about 22 meters a second, which is running at 15% on the boiler, and that is using about 1.55 materials per second, whereas when it was running at, and I've changed that to 34%, it's running at approximately 1.55 materials per second. So it's a third of the material usage running at 15%, and it's basically it's 2/3 of the speed. Sorry, yeah, 2/3 of the speed, so it's more efficient. And then it will go all the way down to this 2%, which is using next to nothing. And just put that back down to 2%, which is then going to be using 0.06 materials per second. So that's yeah, less than a material a minute actually on there if you work that out. So it's 0.6 times 60. No, so 0.06 times 60. It's actually 3.6 materials per second, so a little bit more than I'd thought, and that's over for 3 boilers. So it's still using a fair bit of materials per minute when it's moving, even in its most efficient speed. But we could reduce that further, take it down to 1%, but you're going to reduce that 8 meters a second speed. So all that I've got left to do, apart from a paint job, I've put most of the weapons on there, is I need to look at the anti-laser protection, which is generally going to be using shield projectors set to laser scatter mode. And we're going to do it by saying if there's been a laser attack within the last 10 seconds, then turn the lasers on and turn the shield projectors on and put them into shield scatter mode, and they'll be controlled by the control blocks up in here, which I'll have to set up shortly. And we are now ready for the final phase of this ship build, and for any that skipped straight to this point, this is I've renamed it, rather than the Montecuculi, it's going to be the Duca d'Aosta, because its design and secondary guns and armor was a little bit more than the Monteculi, and more like the Duca degli Abruzzi. So in between those two, so the Duca d'Aosta vessel, and we'll make a maybe a Giuseppe Garibaldi later with missiles, so it would be good. But what have we got here? So basically I did make some changes to my original plan. I've reduced the gauge to 172 mil. They were around 200, still not around the 150, but 172. They got slightly higher velocity and armor piercing that way, and they're running a semi armor piercing shell, so it will pierce light alloy, but will have a problem against multiple layers of metal. But it's got quite a nice HE penetration if it does get through. So we've got the 4 double turrets, and these are set up as multi-barrel turrets rather than being 2 individual guns, which is in keeping with the original Condottieri cruisers, because the guns were in a single cradle. In what that means is they actually elevated all together, and that to be loaded together and fired together. Well, they didn't have to be fired together, but they could not elevate separately. They were joined, so generally everything was done as a pair of guns. It meant that they were very close together, and actually that gave them a problem with accuracy, because the shells would actually interfere with themselves in aerodynamics, as they'll find out. There was also problems with the guns, the way the guns were built, but that's a different matter. That's not relevant to this particular one. But on the larger ships, the shells were not the best of manufacturing, and they were also caused its variance in each shot. But anyway, this one is going as a dual gun. Just a little history there to add to it. We've then got some of the 100 mil dual gun secondaries, which are an AA, primarily an AA and surface ship with a range timed shells and firing a HE fragmentation shell. Now we've got 4 of those, 2 on each side, which is one of the changes to the Montecuculi, because they had the guns on a separate deck in the center, one of them, and then 2 at the side, but it would have meant elongating the ship a little bit more to fit those in properly, and it's getting quite large as it is, so that's fine. We got those level of guns, obviously some twin 40s and 20mm to give it a little bit of an AA protection. There is obviously something which is not typical of this particular thing, which typical era is anti-missile defences, because obviously there was no missiles, but I've had to put in some anti-missile defences because the lightning hoods we're against do fire a lot of missiles and torpedoes out at ships. And then finally we've got some torpedoes, which are a nice little 7-block, quite accurate high-speed torpedo, not ultra high speed, but got a fairly good about 2,800 range, I think, somewhere in that, so 2,500, and they'll go at a good 60 meters a second, and they've got also a targeting guidance, but one thing with the targeting guidance, they must be aimed at the ship. Something I found in testing recently is targeting guidance for sonar, at least, don't not work if it's not in the sonar detection, which we call it scope of the actual sonar head. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. So I haven't given this any weapon testing, so it'll be interesting to see how this goes. And it is designed primarily to go against just easy and regular at best ships. So we're going to give it some we'll give it a first test against some regular ships just to see how it will do or not. It will also, I think, at this level should really be in there with some of the Freccia destroyers, and also some subs I've created as well, which I may show later. But for the moment, let's give it something like an Ampere and see how it goes. So shields have come on, and I haven't changed the colour yet of the shields. They take a little while because the steam engine's got to power up, so we've got an initial bit of a problem with the shield, so we may have to look at that, but that's part of this testing. All the guns are firing, which is good. We'll see what they're doing damage wise to the Ampere. The Ampere, its new design, has got these little Gatling short range missile lasers, so once it gets in close it will obviously give us a bit of a mow down with the lasers. Our shields seem to have stabilized now, and that's going to reduce the damage from those quite nicely. And I think, have we just done that as an AI dead? Yes, we AI killed it. Okay, that's quite okay. Nothing to be said about that one. So let me just sort out the, now I know that the shields are working, we'll change the colours on the shields, all of them. So it's okay against an Ampere. Let's see how it goes against some aerial targets. So we'll give it a, well, the surge is the best at this level, so let's give it a surge to go against, see if it can take it down with its AA guns. Its main guns will also fire if it's in angle and low range. This will also be a test against the for the anti-missiles. I think the surge fires missiles. Looks like our missile defences work, and we are still firing at it quite nicely. Looks like we've done a, you can see the spotlight is actually highlighting the ship for our targeting, and we've either killed it or it's too low for some of the guns. The guns don't like firing. We don't like firing water vessels. So what's the limits? Let's give it a slightly thruster craft. Well, could it take on a Thunderbird? I don't think it will be able to take on a Thunderbird. So I'm effectively going to kill myself here, but it's worth a try. Let's see how close it can take or get to taking out a Thunderbird. I think it's taking... The shields are working so far. The EMP, there's some EMP coming in there quite heavily. I think it's... Was that missiles or... coming in? It's got some missiles, or is it torpedoes? Can't remember what the Thunderbird fires now, but it's firing some EMP in at me. I think they are missiles. It must do... there was a certain barrage at the beginning that managed to get through, but we managed to weather through that. Our speed is a little low than expected, and I think that's because the lasers are using up some of the available power. Potentially I need to increase the steam rate a little bit just to cover the power requirement for the shields. Let's go and check one of the 6 shields and see what power it's at, because that will give me an idea of how close we are. And we're at about 80%. So yeah, we will need to increase our steam rate a bit during battle to allow for the steam, for the shields. Well, in the end, the ship actually did pretty well against a Thunderbird, which is about as powerful a thruster craft we're going to come across. It's surprisingly well. I had to adjust a couple of bits, just its range, so that in the in its AI it would try to stay around the 900 to 1000, basically set to go in and out sort of process. It was originally going up to 1500. The shields did stabilize after the beginning, so that was fine. I'm just not happy with the anti-missile system, but it survived, which is good against a basic system. So the only other one, what's the biggest? We got the Eclipse and Ascension prototype. I'm not sure if we'll go for an Eclipse and say some easy ones, Voltar, and what's an easy system? Maybe a Conduit and a Firefly. So we're going to go against our last fight, everything against it. And I didn't even give it time to reload its weapons, so I'm guessing these are only there. Oh, they're not too badly loaded up. It's got quite a lot of weapons, not too much ammo. We've got things coming in. Is these anti-missiles firing? Oh, they are now. At first I didn't think they were firing. This one doesn't seem to be, but it is set to fire only at larger missiles. Although it is firing there, that's good. So there's quite a lot of anti-missile interceptors it uses rather than lasers. But I'm not using smoke, and I did think about that. Should I really use smoke on this? But this is quite fast, and as you can see, it's running at it was 27 meters a second there. 24 it's coming down to, and that number of the smoke would just get it'd move out of the smoke too quickly because of its speed. It was having a good fire at that Volta there. I think it's now having another go at it in a second. Or are we going against the Conduit? It's getting nice and close at this second, closer than I would have expected, but that's fair. The Eclipse is a big enemy ship. It's got its torpedoes are firing as well. I'm glad that they did fix some of the ships, because I did notice before some of the AIs on the Lightning hoods were not active on spawn. I've got to say that Firefly is annoying, because it every now and again it uses the warp and it just blips out, which is can make it somewhat annoying. Yeah, you see that blip there. We're getting to it though. It is destroying it. Our 100mm guns are gradually taking it down, I think, and we're at 100%. Obviously got repairs, and I'm running, because my character's in there supplying resources, we are effectively at unlimited resources. But I would expect this to be fighting in a pretty resource heavy battle, shall we say. Just looking at how those main guns are doing, and they are exploding inside, which is perfect. So they are penetrating and giving a good internal damage to lots of the items in here, which is what I was hoping for with those semi-armor piercing for this small medium size cannon. And I think that's about it for that Eclipse. It's down to 70 odd %, and it's not really firing back. And yeah, I'm quite happy with the main guns. They've not had to reload so far. They've been constant firing all the time, which is also another, yeah, not getting them too fast. These will just survive a long battle, which I think with ammo changes coming up, long battles will be more the priority, I think, rather than high rate of fire quick battles. So what now for the fleet? We have the Duca d'Aosta light cruiser, which has proved itself quite well. We have the Freccia destroyer over here, which is okay against the easy ships and small vessels. And we also have the Brin class submarine, which is quite good at giving some medium range torpedoes against ships. And I think next we'd be looking at maybe giving some attention to the Marine Nationale, or looking at one of the battleships that was part of the Italian Navy, to look at something that would take on the expert level of Lightning hoods. So maybe the Roma class, or maybe the heavy cruiser of the Zara style would be good. Ultimately, I may also do another cruiser which is going to be missile armed, using the cluster missile system to do some long range or medium range air-to-air missiles, etc., based upon this particular frame, but changing it to be a more modernized version to go against some of the aircraft and higher level ships. As always, any comments down below about what you think of these ships? This was mainly just looking at the steam, how to get the speed out of a large ship, and how to use the economy of the new steam boilers to best efficiency. I could have used I'm going to say just quickly on there, I did think about using the pressure and auto regulate, but I wasn't happy with that, so I'm still prefer using a set burn rate over the auto regulate of the pressure. But that may change in future ships when I can find a specific reason to use that. If you think there's a particular ship that you'd like to see, please leave it down in the comments below. But as always, keep playing the game and have fun.